G'day everyone. Today I'm here with Jeff from SMB Consultants. Jeff, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks.
Good, mate. Thank you for joining us today. And today we're going to talk about common problems with SMB systems. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about you and what SMB Consultants does.
Hi, I'm Jeff Atizado. I'm the CEO and co-founder of SMB Consultants. I'm best known for helping product selling businesses achieve stress-free operations and accurate inventory by implementing connected systems that work seamlessly together.
Cool. And so what kind of clients do you work with? You said product sellers. Talk me through product sellers.
Yeah, typically I work with product selling businesses. They could be retail, online, manufacturing, wholesale, and they'll turn over anywhere between 1 and 50 million.
Mhm.
They'll sell it through a combination of online and physical locations. Typically, these businesses are they see growth through selling through online channels, and they need technology to consolidate their order management into one place so they can ship more efficiently, make better decisions on what to buy.
Awesome. Thank you, mate. So you've been doing this for a little while now, haven't you?
Yes, it's coming on. This will be our 15-year anniversary.
Wow, congratulations. That's a huge period
I
of time to be
know.
in this space. That's gold.
I know.
Amazing. So, given that you have seen a lot of SMB systems, um, what's your take on why a lot of SMB systems are set up so problematically?
Yeah, over the years, I think we could probably sum it down to three key points. One is like a common mistake we often see them make is they often implement new software, but they use it the old way.
Mhm.
So, I often tell business owners that the way they use their current system is their operating system. And so when they go to set up a new system, they bring that old operating system with them and they don't try to revisit that solution with fresh eyes, thinking outside the box. And oftentimes, we're moving businesses from centralized legacy systems into connected cloud-based systems. So there's a fundamental shift in mindset in terms of how that software stack comes together. So that's probably the first area. I think the second is they focus on migrating the data and don't take time to redefine their workflows that will improve their business. So yeah, again, they're just stuck in their ways. Maybe also garbage in, garbage out. That's a big one. We all know that data is king, and we rely on good data to make confident decisions. But I think the problem that I see is that they lack the understanding of how this data will map across the different systems. And it's an afterthought, right? So they are implementing the system, they're filling out spreadsheets, but they just don't understand the implications of how that data will be used from one system to the next. So they implement the system, and then it's not till later on when they're actually live with the system and they start to run some reports that they start to see the implications of the mistakes they made in the first place.
In the
And
setup?
that's just lack of experience and knowledge.
Yeah.
And then I think the last problem I see in setups is they implement software reactively, which leads to a term which we've coined over the last 15 years called Frankenapps, which is basically when we see a business that has sort of they they dive in headfirst into software, and they look at a problem that's causing them pain within the business, and they look to put out or they find a solution reactively to put out that fire. And so that leads to Frankenapps, where they get this sort of software stack of a big mixed bag of solutions that aren't really working well together, and they haven't implemented in workflows that really allow them to leverage the benefits of integration.
Yeah, it's funny, Frankenapps, Frankenstein's monster. I used to call it app addiction. You get app addiction when you have a problem and there must be an app for that. So yeah, very common thing. I actually did a podcast with Marty Lewis on that one too. Check that out if you got some time. But let's talk about some of those. It's literally one of the reasons we built Work Guru was because app for this, app for that, app for stock, app for purchasing, app for invoicing, timesheets, asset management, all that kind of stuff is why we built it. I want to talk about the first point that you raised there. And the first point that you raised there was I basically want to copy and paste my old process into the new system. Um, it's a really, really big one, and a lot of people really struggle with they document their process perfectly the way that they do it right now, but then they want to change system. And it's impossible really to copy and paste that process into the new system. And why do you think that's such an issue for people?
Because people hate change. That's what it comes down to. We hate it. We'll fight tooth and nail to hang on to what we know. And I think people are fearful that change will have an impact on their ability to do their job well. So they fall back on what they know. And unfortunately, that becomes the thing. Like they just want a new system and use it the old way. That's actually what they're sometimes they come and they're like, oh, my old system had this report or this button, and this is the way that we did it. And that ends up actually holding them back because unless they actually look at it with fresh eyes, there can be a lot of unrealized value. I mean, they have to really think about why they're in the situation in the first place, right? I mean, they're there because things aren't working properly. And so, unless they have that mindset to change and to really revisit these workflows, they're probably not going to resolve the issues that got them there in the first place. So they often rely, sometimes they hold on to maybe what got them that success in the first place. Like this is the way we've always done it, and we've been successful, so they hang on to that, and they're a bit resistant to change because that's how they've always done things.
Yeah, that I always say that those are the most dangerous words in business because we've always done it this way. And you're right, people are terrified of change. It's a very primal thing. Am I going to lose my job? Is this going to undermine the way I do everything? Am I still important to the business? So very common to see those kind of things. The second point that you touched on is I think is really interesting, and it's one that I think deserves a lot more attention than it gets, is the data. How is the data going to be used in the old system versus the new system? Can you talk me through your approach to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the early days when we were doing cloud integration, it was just about like, wow, we were so impressed that you could just connect things and be able to build dashboards that could allow you to see things in one place. And we saw that trend. And then that went to machine learning in terms of how can we use that data to make better decisions. And now obviously AI is the big thing of, taking that the next level. So I think for small businesses, it's critical that they have the right data, right? They need to be able to trust their data and know that they can make sound decisions on that. The problem they have is that oftentimes that data is shared between systems, but it's used in different ways. So, for example, in an inventory management system, you might be looking at things like categories, for example, right? And the categories define how you might do your reporting across different areas. But on a website, those categories define how a shopper, it defines the user experience, how they'll actually navigate their way through your product offering and help them find products easily so that they can check out in the most efficient way. So there's a shared use of data there, but the the way it's used in each system is completely different. And that's often where people get stuck in the weeds is there's so many fields to fill out when you look at a spreadsheet and the context of how it'll be used in each system is not always the question isn't asked when they're setting up, right? So they may be just looking at it through one lens in terms of, okay, a category is a category, I'm going to define it this way. But if they don't ask the second question, which is, well, if you use these as categories, is this actually the way you want your financial reports to look? Right? Or is this actually the way that you want your shoppers to shop online? That's probably the better question to ask. And I think that that's where a lot of mistakes can be made. And they only really come to the surface much later down the track. And as you know, once you have transactional data, trying to undo those mistakes is very time consuming.
Yeah, it's a much more of a painful thing. You touched on something there, which I had a conversation with a potential client about this morning, and it's a really tough thing. Is everyone's got a different definition for the same word. And it's going to sound really horrible, but it doesn't matter what the end user's definition for that word. It matters what the idiot developer, in Work Guru's case, me, thought that word should mean when we built the first thing. Because everything hangs off that. And like you say, I mean, whether it's your Work Guru, Shopify, Zero, we're all going to have a thing that's called category, right? But what do we use it for, and how does that interaction work? So it's a really interesting one, and definitely one of the reasons you should get, if you're changing systems, working with somebody who knows all of the systems you're going to use well, because those little gotchas can be a right royal pain on the day after go live, for example.
Well, it's like translating a language almost, isn't it?
Mm,
It's like you become multilingual if you support multiple systems. You know how that category translates into the next system.
yep.
And that's really what you're doing is understanding, well, what is the best choice or what is the best interpretation of that word as it moves, that piece of data moves between different systems.
And to extend that, can you translate English to German to Chinese to German to English and come back the other way? What do you get when you do those translations, and what kind of wonderful weirdness comes back at you?
And then I think the other thing, and I'm sure you've come across this as well, is people often throw, I like to think of tags and custom fields as duct tape.
Mm,
Um, Duct tape can be a great tool in used in the right scenario and the right, situation. But if it's used for everything, and it's a one size fits all, then often it's just a band-aid fix. So, I think you need to really be careful in terms of that, understanding your main category tree and your main sort of hierarchy of data that will be mapped across systems. Be really deliberate in terms of how you set that up. But then on the edge use cases, you can use things like tags and custom fields where maybe there are gaps in the software where you need some extra reporting capabilities.
yeah, 100%. And a big part of that is defining what reports you need before you actually start. That comes back to that sort of data question.
Yeah, but sometimes businesses don't know that, I mean, and, you can ask the question and maybe they will tell you what they currently have or what they'd like to have. But I usually find that that's a great question to ask actually once they've been using the system. And it's, part of the advisory work that we do is like to revisit the business and to go, what reports can we now pull from that? But it all works on the basis that you get your data set up correctly first. If the data is set up correctly first, then whatever reports you want to build, you can build. If the integrity of the data is there, um, then it's just about how you organize it. But if you haven't done that pre-work of understanding how to pre-configure that data, then it really stifles that conversation later down the track.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. The pre-work is really important. You can go back and fix it once you're live, and like no one gets it perfect to start off with, but yeah, the pre-work super important to make sure that you're starting on the right track. So lots of common reasons and symptoms of why you get things. What does that translate to in terms of the top, the common problems that you run across? So we've got, garbage data. We've got, Franken apps, as you call them. You've got, data mismatch between how it's going to be used. How does that translate into the business? What are the top couple of problems that you see businesses have when they've got their tech stack wrong?
Yeah. So again, at a high level, you know, we've gone through this amazing period of being able to connect systems. I think COVID, particularly in our industry, forced businesses to open up online sales channels. It became just not a luxury, but a necessity because brick and mortar, as you know, got closed down. So that there was a cause on effect from that. People opened up sales channels. They used technology to be able to widen their footprint and to get their product in front of more customers. But then the downflow effect of that is that they had all these sales channels and they had no central point of truth. So they really, I think that one problem is they struggle to keep track of their orders and manage inventory in one place, right? So if they've got everything in separate silos, it's really like every sales channel that they open up becomes a multiplier of time and work and problems and administration. And so it really stifles their growth because they see every sales channel that they open up not as growth, but actual additional admin and work. Um, the second part is maybe I see businesses that when they don't have the right tech stack and they are maybe have that Franken situation, they're just frustrated with the business and the tools that they use because they're not working for them. And that can really lead to things like what we call operational chaos. It's often like we see businesses, it can also be have a huge impact on staff morale. You know, we see a lot of businesses where if the tools aren't working, they basically use the tools to the lowest common denominator, the one way they've figured out how to use the system. And it seems to be Chinese whispers that like that gets passed on in terms of how to use the system. Maybe some people have left and they've taken that knowledge with them, and there's just no documented process. And so people are really just operating at the very bare minimum to get through their job and to get through their day. And that causes massive frustration in the business to the point where it could actually draw the business owner back into working in the business because
Yeah.
they're the person that knows all the answers and knows how to fix things. And that can be have a huge impact on the business owner and the growth. And then I think the last thing is uh, when they don't trust their data, they feel left in the dark when it comes to their business data, and they're worried that they can't make the right decisions that will lead to growth. I think this is a huge one for business owners because there's a lot more competition now in this industry and in our economy. Like there's a lot of pressure from big corporations that are taking more market share and squeezing margins. And businesses have to be smarter in terms of how they do business. And if they don't really have the data to make those right decisions, it can make them feel really worried about, how are they going to survive in this modern age where technology is making things more efficient and big corporations are seemingly trying to take market share from them. So we're really focused and we're really on a mission on helping small businesses provide them with the right technology that allows them to compete and thrive in this new world that we live in.
Yeah, and look, it's I always think about each of those things, and I completely agree. The last one is probably for me the most important because I think people can get away with not using systems perfectly and a little bit of admin overhead. And not optimal. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't think people should strive for that. But if you have admin overhead and you're not using your systems optimally and you don't have data, man, are you in a world of trouble. I was chatting to somebody this morning who has just started to get a little bit of a handle on their inventory data after, and they've run a product business for quite a few years. And they do some manufacturing. They launched a new product line, and now they realize they have 5 years worth of that product in stock. Um, and it's kind of the first time they've had that data, and they're going to pay for that. They're going to pay to store it. They've already paid the supplier for it. Does it now get thrown out? Do you write it off? Do you discount it? Do you sell it? How do you get it out the door? So for me, that's probably the biggest one because without data, you can't make that decision. And you don't know, you're guessing. And if you're guessing when you're running a business, the big corporates are going to eat you for lunch.
Yeah, I don't think a business can really continue to grow unless they have the right systems that give them the data to make those decisions. They can't be just sort of, we used to see a lot of businesses do their ordering kind of like looking at their stock, walking into the warehouse, a bit of a gut feel, you know. And I just don't think that businesses can survive today without having access to the data that doesn't replace their business acumen, it reinforces it.
Mm.
I think that's what people don't realize is that these systems aren't going to make the decisions on their own and they're going to lose control of their business. By no means. It just gives them more information to allow them to make better decisions more quickly. And I think that most businesses, I think if there's in the top three things that people want to achieve is they want better data. They want to be able to make better decisions. They want better reports than what they have. It's always at the top of, the things that they're looking to achieve. And it's critical in today's age because with AI, it all works off the basis of looking at large chunks of data to help people make more better decisions in a lot less time. So if you don't have that in the first place, you're really at a disadvantage.
Yeah, 100%. And there's a lot going on in the LLM and AI space as well. I personally don't actually think it has a good place right now in the operational decision making. Somebody was asking me about this morning with AI. Should I use an AI agent to place my purchase orders for me? And I personally think if your data's perfect, it's a good place to start to get it to maybe auto generate some drafts for you. But would you trust AI right now to send a $10 million purchase order out for you? Or would that, yeah, that's terrifying to me. So 100% agree that the data is really useful for AI and things like that. But where do you think AI fits in terms of structuring as part of the operational process for this kind of thing?
No, but that's the point that I usually make is not to let it have, you know, ultimate decision of doing that, where you open the tap and it's just doing things without your approval. I think it helps cut down and raise awareness to the areas, the things that you need to do so you can make simpler decisions more quickly, right? So you might get the AI to generate a forecast report based on sales trends and stock turns and stock on hand so that you can arrive at a place where you can approve that PO or you can make adjustments to it
Mhm.
and not have to walk around your warehouse manually filling out a spreadsheet. That's the type of things that I think AI can do is summarizing data more quickly than what we can. There's no doubt about that AI's additional computing power that we can leverage.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the decisions should still lie with the business owner. They don't lose that control,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, 100%. It comes back to one of the first things you said about garbage in, garbage out, right? So if you automate a process or you outsource a process with rubbish data, you're going to get horrendous results. And that ties back into that business acumen. You as the owner go, well, I'm ordering 10,000 of these. I ordered 10,000 of those last week. I know that we have 10,000 of those. Um, you have the intellectual capacity and the acumen to know that. Whereas if that's not in your data set, any automated process, whether it's AI or just automation, it's not going to know that. So it's really important to make sure that you do have that human interaction and human intervention and control over those operational systems. Otherwise, you might end up, buying an extra 5 years of inventory that you don't need, and you raised a PO for it, so you're liable for it, and you're going to have to pay for it, and that's going to really hurt.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, these are just new tools, right? So it's like, I really feel like I have that same feeling with AI that I did when we first experienced the internet. And it was like, what do we need this for? Like there's some people that really like understood it. I remember sitting and going to an internet cafe and seeing the very first, I think it was AOL chatbot or something like
Hmm.
that. And somebody was chatting, and I was like, oh my God, where is this person? I had no idea. But the actual application of the internet, it didn't really make sense to me yet. And I kind of have that a little bit of that feeling with AI now that it's like it's a shift in mindset in terms of like how you can leverage it as a tool in the way we behave and interact with it. Like, there had to be a shift with the internet instead of going to the library and to study off books and newspapers and articles to doing Google searches. No one really knew how to do a Google search. Now it's a skill that people use every day. I think prompting is that new tool, right? It's like discovering, well, how do we actually interact with this so that we can leverage, and it's just every day there's new applications of how it can be used, some better than others. Maybe some people are sort of like pushing the boundaries further than maybe what we're willing to take on board right now.
Mm.
But it's certainly interesting. I think that yeah, there's the number of applications across all industries is really infinite.
It's huge. You talked about the advent of the internet, and talking about learning how to, the Dewey Decimal System, going to how do I write a Google search. I'm pretty sure I remember the Australian Internet Games about 1980, 1998, 1999, if I'm dating myself a
Now we're
little bit there.
showing
Yeah,
our age.
back in the 90s. And a kid from my class at school won the Australian Internet Games for being able to find a thing on the internet the fastest. And it was a really new skill because nobody had it. And you're right, AI is exactly the same. But yeah, it's a new skill. It's a new tool to learn. But if you don't know how to use that tool you're going to be a little bit scared of it, and B, you can do some damage with it. Like you shouldn't pick up a chainsaw if you don't know the first thing about it. You shouldn't turn AI loose on your business systems if you don't know
Yeah,
anything
agree.
about it either.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's finding that balance, definitely like, and, even myself within running my own business, as a business owner myself, I'm constantly weighing that up, like how much of my time will this save versus, is this something that I should still just keep ownership of and do myself? So I think that that's something, that process is something that everyone else has to go through within
Yeah,
their own business.
agreed. And we find it really useful for certain things, like transcripting these videos kind of thing, and highlighting bits that it thinks is useful and interesting. I mean, you're using an AI tool to record this. I'll use an AI tool to process it. Would I use an AI tool to write my code and do my releases? Oh no, I would
No.
I would be so scared of doing that. But stuff that's not mission critical but does massively save us time and money to do it, I think that's a perfect place for it.
Yeah, 100% agree.
We got a little bit off track there because AI is a very interesting topic. But so we talked about a lot of the business problems that things create. So you've got people not knowing what their order levels, what their inventory, what their open jobs are. They're using the tools minimally. Then they're maybe entering a client name and an invoice, right? And they've got no data to make the decision of. How do you break those down from a solving each of those problems business? How do you take its impact on the business is? How do you diagnose it? And most importantly, for everyone listening and business owners who are wanting to do this themselves, how do you fix it?
Yeah. Um, well, in my experience, the first step is to take a step away from the business and look at the big picture. And understanding the big picture in terms of what they currently have and what potentially they could be incorporating, I think is the first step because a lot of business owners still think of their business in silos. So they might come to us for an inventory management system and think we're a consultant for inventory and we'll recommend an IMS, which we will. But really, when a business owner thinks about their business, it's really the sum of all of their software packages working together, mainly across operational areas. So there's accounting, there might be online, there could be marketing. There's a whole bunch of different areas that they need to look at. So I think the first step is to take a step back, do an assessment over what they're currently using, what's working, what isn't working, and then just get a better understanding of the lay of the land, right? And explore maybe what are some potential other solutions that could be identifying areas where maybe they're spending too much time doing double entry, or maybe they're not getting the right reporting, or maybe they can't access the data the way that they want. There's a lot of low hanging fruit that we see in a lot of businesses that they don't identify. Because they're working in the business, it's just all that they know. So they just assume that the status quo is the most efficient way. They don't know what they don't know.
Yep.
So I think that's the first step is just to sit down with somebody that knows business, has experience working across different industries, has some experience in knowing what has worked in the past. And by the way, what works for one business may work for another business, but it's not, I don't think there is a glass slipper that you can recommend to every business that will work. In my experience, every business is unique because of the people that work in it and the tools and how they actually use the existing tools. So I think that's the second part is once you see the lay of the land, then there needs to be a process that explores how they're currently doing things versus how they could potentially be doing things because it's that change management piece, right? Far too often I see businesses jump forward into migrating the data. They get set up, they make assumptions about how the software will work, and then they only realize while they're actually doing the implementation and trying to go live and serving customers that there's areas that they don't have the answers to. And it creates this a lot of tension, first of all, a lot of frustration. It's kind of one step forward, two steps back. They often end up, if they're doing self-implementation, they end up having to deal with a support team, which is very good from a technical standpoint, but they're generally dealing with an arbitrary support agent that doesn't have any context of their business.
Yeah.
So the support agent can answer their question from a technical point of view and provide a solution or a recommendation, but more often than not, these workflows are quite complex. They span across many different pieces of software. And I think a lot of businesses have had that feeling where they feel like they're sort of in between the cracks or in between software support teams,
Yeah.
and no one can really they can walk to the fence, but they won't cross the fence. So yeah, having that discussion and exploring potentially, okay, this is how you do things, this is how you potentially could change, so that they can not only get a first look at how a business might change. I have this analogy of like, if you want to buy a house, if you're thinking about moving, go walk through a showroom first and have a look at, the rooms and the way that they've set up the appliances and the living area, so you can get a feel for what the house looks like before you move in and how your furniture might actually fit the place you're moving into. And ask questions and make some decisions and have that blueprint and that architectural plan in place before you go to build the house, right? Far too often people just jump to moving into a house and they haven't actually given it any thought, right? They just expect everything will fit.
Yeah, I'm not sure that they don't give it any thought. They just think about it without expert guidance. And it's people don't build a house all the time, and people don't move business systems all the time unless they're working for a cloud integrator like SMB. And it's one of the reasons that we very strongly recommend anyone who's coming to Work Guru who's anything other than a very simple, basic Work Guru plus zero uses an integrator, because it's exactly that. It's not the technical capability of you setting up Zero or you setting
Mm.
up Work Guru or you setting up Shopify that is the difficult bit. It's how those processes flow together, what each of the idiosyncrasies mean, and how best to look at it from an overall flow, from timesheets to purchasing to projects to stock control, to how that hits your balance sheet and your revenue, and do you want to do a WIP journal, and how do you account for overtime costs, and all of the stuff that people just kind of hope works the way they want to, because it's really easy to read a feature list. Like, to use your buying a house example, you go 4 bedroom, 2 bathroom, double lock up garage, 405 square meters. Good. That's a house kind of thing. But you know, what kind of dinners are we hosting? Do we need a big kitchen? Do we need a big dining room? We have Gran that comes to visit. Do we need wide access doors to get a wheelchair in? All of that kind of stuff. It's really hard to see how that fits when you just have a feature list that says, even work here, it says, job management projects, schedule, timesheets, invoicing, stock control, purchasing, asset management. You go, awesome. What does that mean? How do I use it? What does it mean for me every day? So yeah, it really, one of the things we recommend is very much to use a partner for exactly that reason.
Yeah, and I think it really gives business owners a little bit of peace of mind and clarity around, they probably are trying to organize it in their own mind, but they're not, they usually don't come to us thinking that they're going to talk about their entire business as a whole, but it's definitely reassuring. And then I think the second bit is, once you've had a look at the lay of the land and you've got a bit of a game plan, how do you then break that down into stages? Because every business that we work with has limited time, limited resources, and lack the knowledge of how to actually implement, right? So that's really the big problem that we help solve for businesses, is how can we help them organize their time, organize their limited resources, and provide them a service and a process that allows them to get to using the system with this limited window, this time frame that they are usually working within.
Yeah.
So
The
they're
quiet
successful.
time.
Yeah.
The
And
quiet time where you do the big project. Yep.
if you lose that window of opportunity, oftentimes then you got to go another 6 months or 12 months or whenever that next window of opportunity comes around. So yeah,
Yeah.
if you can identify the low-hanging fruit and you can stage things out for business and say, listen, we don't have to do this all in one go. We can start with these things. These things are going to deliver immediate value. Once you start to see some of that value, we can then move on to the next thing, and I think that that's a well-received approach, because business owners really ultimately they just want a return on investment. They want to see results. And so if you can provide them with that clarity and that confidence in terms of how they can move forward, I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, 100%. And how do you keep people on track? Once you've done the project, once you've figured out the process, once you've done the implementation, how do you keep the staff and the teams on track, not just, now, but 3 months, 6 months, 12 months from now?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a skill set that we've had to bring on board. And I think is, you know, what a lot of businesses don't see us as, they don't see us as project managers initially. They see us as IT people.
Yeah.
They put us in that bucket of IT specialists, which we are. But I think that the skill set that gets overlooked is the project management side of things, being able to build a project management plan, being able to manage people, book in times, be able to deliver sessions in a structured way, be able to communicate. I always, we need to be providing information to business owners proactively. We need to be spoon feeding them in terms of where their project is at, what are the roadblocks, what pieces of information do we need, what's holding us back. All of those things, like giving it in a way that is digestible and actionable is critical. And we know what we need from the client, helping them manage their resources. That's probably the skill set that gets often overlooked initially, but once they engage with us, then they sort of get a good experience of that. And I always tell my staff that the client should always feel like they're in the back seat going on a ride, and just we're the tour guides taking them through this exhibition park, and they're getting to see all the highlights. And if they don't feel that the guide knows what they're doing and that they're not on the right path, and they feel the temptation to grab the wheel, that's a bad sign, right? And business owners often get to that point and they don't want to. They want to actually feel like they're being on a tour and guided, and they want to take the back seat and know that they're on the right tour, right?
Yeah, 100%. Don't let them jump out and get eaten by the lions either.
Yeah, that's right.
Jeff, for any SMBs looking at their tech systems in 2025, do you have any key tips for them?
Um, yeah, I think key tips is like take a step back, have a chat with an integrator to look at the big picture. We'll sit down with your team for a scoping session and we'll discuss your current challenges and goals. And together we'll come up with a solution that addresses your specific pain points and also a way of staging that out. And you'll feel relieved knowing that you have a clear plan and the support to make it happen. So hopefully you'll gain the confidence in your business future and your ability to make decisions, and it will be it'll give you the ability to make those decisions that will lead to growth.
Awesome. Thanks for chatting. If anyone does want to get in touch with you, how do they find you?
You can reach out to smbconsultants.com.au, which is our website. You can also send us an email at inquiries@smbconsultants.com.au. And you can also find me on LinkedIn if you want to add me to your professional network. It's just LinkedIn under my name, Jeffrey Atizado.
Perfect. Jeff, thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate it.